Hello students, I'm Jyotika Jakhar and I'm going to teach the first chapter from your English textbook Flamingo for Class 12 CBSE Board. The name of the chapter is The Last Lesson by Alphonse Daudet. The chapter is set up in the background of Franco-Persian War, where Germany and her allies had conquered parts of France and wanted to impose their rule and language on Alsace and Lorraine. Now, the story revolves around a small boy whose name is Franz. He is very reluctant to go to school. One, because he is running late. Secondly, he had not done his homework. The teacher had given him the homework of learning the rules of participles, and now he is dreading that the teacher is going to scold him. So he wants to run away from school and spend the entire day outside because the day was very warm and sunny, the birds were chirping, the soldiers were marching on the streets, and he wanted to witness it all. When he is reluctantly moving towards the school, he notices that there's a huge crowd outside the town hall, and people were standing near the bulletin board to read some news. In those days, bulletin boards were the places where people could access news, and obviously, since it was wartime, so the bulletin boards were the harbinger of all kinds of bad news, like the draft notices where people were ordered to join army forcefully, and the orders of the commanding officers were put up there, and there was obviously the news about the lost battles as well. When little Franz reached school, he noticed that it was a very unusual day at school. The day, which generally began with a lot of noise and bustle, there was a lot of opening and closing of desks, with the teacher banging the ruler against the table. But that particular day, it was as quiet as a Sunday morning, and all the children were in their places. Mr. M. Hamill, the teacher, was pacing up and down with the ruler under his arm. Now Franz was really frightened to enter the classroom, but the teacher did not scold him at all. Another thing that Franz noticed was that the teacher was wearing his beautiful green coat, frilled shirt, and embroidered black silk cap, which he normally wore only on inspection and prize days. The entire school looked very serious and wore a very strange look. And strangely enough, the back benches were occupied by village people. As Franz was still wondering about the current strange scenario, just then Mr. M. Hamill demanded full attention and announced that it was their last lesson in French, and these words were like a thunderclap. These words took everyone by surprise. He also revealed that orders from Berlin had come to only teach German in schools of Alsace and Lorraine, and a new teacher was soon going to be appointed, and he would join the next day onwards to teach only German. Now, this grim realization dawns on all the people there. Franz realized that he had so much more to learn. He felt sorry for whiling away his time and skipping his lessons. Now, he did not want to part with his books of grammar and history. They all seemed like old friends to him. He was deeply pained at the thought of Mr. M. Hamill going away. Now, he completely forgot about his teacher's ruler, his cranky nature, and his strict demeanor. Mr. M. Hamill had worn his fine sun. Then Franz realized that why the villagers had gathered in the classroom as a sign of remorse for not having gone to school more often, and they were there to thank their master for his meritorious service of 40 years, and as a mark of respect for the country which was no longer theirs. Now, little Franz was filled with regret. He was asked by Mr. M. Hamill to recite the rule for participle, but he got stuck on the very first word. He was filled with so much shame and regret that he wished that he was able to recite the rules flawlessly. He was immensely guilty of mixing up everything. But Mr. M. Hamill did not scold Franz. Rather, he commented upon man's nature of postponing or procrastinating things. He made them realize the irony of not being able to speak or write French in spite of being a Frenchman. Little Franz was not able to recite the rules of the participles, but M. Hamill, the teacher, he did not scold him. He rather blamed the parents, the society, and himself for the entire scenario. He said that the children were sent on work by the parents to work on the farms or mills so that they could get extra income for the house. And he also blamed himself for sending children either to water his garden or he would give them a holiday often enough whenever he wanted to go fishing. So it was the entire society as such that was to be blamed for not inculcating seriousness towards education and language in the children. Now, on that particular last lesson, M. Hamel praised French language and he asked the children to hold it dearly to their hearts and to always guard it. He said that it was the most beautiful language in the world. And then he gave them the last lesson in grammar. He explained everything with unusual patience. He wanted to teach them everything in one go. This was followed by a lesson in writing, after which he gave them new copies with France and Alsace written in beautiful handwriting on top of each one of them. And all these notebooks, when kept on the tables, seemed like little flags. So everybody on that particular day was filled with great patriotic fervor. There was pin drop silence in the classroom as Mr. M. Hamill taught. Everybody gave their 100% to understand what was being taught in the class. Even small little beetles which flew in the class and would usually distract the students failed to do so on that day. And the only noise that could be heard in the classroom was the scratching of pens over paper. Even the smallest ones, the youngest ones, were working with complete concentration, and nothing could distract them on that day. And on that day, at that moment, Franz pondered if the Germans could change the cooing of the pigeons that were cooing on the windowsill outside the classroom. So he wondered whether the German soldiers could take away the language which is dear to people in their hearts. Could they take that language away from them? Now, Mr. M. Hamill, who had been working in that particular school for last 40 years, and people were there in order to pay him respect, he wanted to absorb everything. He wanted to soak in everything because that was his last day. He looks at the garden outside, the trees, the vines that he himself had planted and had now grown up over the years. He wanted to absorb everything before he left, and he wanted to teach everything that he knew to the children on that particular day because that indeed was the last. Mr. Hamill keeps his courage and hears every lesson to the last. He delivers his last lesson in history, and everyone is roused to emotion when the last lesson draws to its close. As Mr. M. Hamill stands up, he appears to be very tall because he had risen in his stature in the eyes of all the people who were there. People were looking at him with a new found respect. Mr. M. Hamill roused the spirit of patriotism, and just then the church clock strikes 12. Trumpets of Persian soldiers sounding under the windows could be heard. Overwhelmed with emotions, Mr. M. Hamill writes Vive la France on the blackboard and then dismisses the school by making a gesture with his hand. Dear children, I'm enclosing some questions for your practice at the end of the summary, and I hope that each one of you practices these questions in your notebook with honesty and dedication. Thank you so much.